Good evening, everyone, and thank you for attending this evening's discussion on the roles and responsibilities of school boards and school board members. This evening's discussion is presented by the League of Women Voters of the Akron Area, Akron NAACP, Akron Promise, and Honesty for Ohio Education. This evening, we will be discussing what a school board member does, what makes an effective school board member, and what resources are available for current and prospective school board members. On our panel this evening are Reno Contipelli, Northeast Regional Manager for the Ohio School Board Association, and Chapman, member of the Board of Education for the Berea City School District, and Malia, President of the Board of Education of the Cleveland University City School District. Moderating our discussion this evening is Dr. Lathardus Goggins, a social and emotional learning specialist at Applied Academic Solutions. It's my pleasure to introduce this panel. I'm Andrew Green, the Voter Services Voter Services Programs and Information Director for the League of Women Voters of the Akron Area. Following the discussion between our panelists and our moderator this evening, we will take some questions from the audience. There's index cards that have been passed around. Just flag down one of our volunteers. We'll get those up to Dr. Goggins to round out the end of the discussion. Turn it over to Dr. Goggins.
Well, again, thank you everyone for being here. So as we are starting, we're here to explore what it means, what it takes, what's the significance of being a board member. Right? So to our panelists, again, thank you for your willingness to enter into this conversation. So this is for everyone, and if you could just take a brief time just to share a little bit about who you are, the role that you play, but what does it mean, or what are some of the joys and challenges that you feel of being a school board member, if you share a thought or two?
That's a big question.
Well, let's see. So either after this, yes.
I'll start. My name is Malia Lewis. I am in my eighth. I lost track. 8th year on the school board for the Cleveland Heights University Heights City School District. One of the biggest joys of serving on the school board for my district is the cohesion I enjoyed with my other board members, the 5 of us, and it hasn't been the same 5 for the 8 years I've been on it, all have a singular focus on our 5,000 kiddos and what's best for them, and everything else sort of takes a distant second place. We don't always agree on everything, but we do agree that we have to work on what's best for our students. As a district, we're peculiar because we're in a part of Northeast Ohio with an overabundance of private and parochial schools. So half or slightly less than half of our school-age children in the community attend public school. But flip side is that 75% of our budget come from locally voted on real estate property levies. So we have huge support for the public school district in our community, even though we don't have all the kids in the buildings. So representing my community and doing what I think is best, or what I hope is best for our kiddos, is a huge joy. Challenges are easy. We are constrained, like seriously constrained, by Columbus and Washington, D.C. Everything. And I've been around this block before, where we just got the reconciliation for the state biennial budget dropped at 2 in the morning. That was fun. And once you take your nose out of the 5,000 kiddos that I'm concerned about, I do feel like I'm constantly beating my head against a brick wall when it comes to public policy at a higher level on this piece. And it can be infuriating and depressing. But then I have to remember, I've got the 5,000 kiddos, so I can go back to that.
Oh, you're welcome.
Would you speak right into the microphone?
Sure. Yep, can you hear?
Better.
Good evening, my name is Anna Chapman. I'm in my 12th year as a member of the Berea Board of Education. Berea is a suburb of Cleveland in Cuyahoga County, and we also have about 5,000 students in our district. I'm also a teacher. I just finished my 32nd year as an elementary music teacher in a different district. And a mom of 3 proud public school graduates. And my joy of being a board member also comes from the students and their successes and our staff. And graduation is usually my favorite event of the year because there's just a lot of joy and smiling and hugs. I don't know every single one of the 5,000, but having been a mother while I've been a board member, it was just pure joy to see all of my kids' friends that I know since they were in kindergarten walk across that stage. And it's a privilege that I know not most people have. I also just enjoy the opportunity to serve my community. And my parents were immigrants in this country. I'm first-gen American. So being able to see my name on a ballot and run for office was something that brought my parents great joy and myself as well. And I'm proud that I could show my children that. A challenge is definitely Columbus, especially. For some reason, there's hatred towards public education, even though 90% of the kids in the state attend public schools. Also, a challenge that I find is everybody thinks that they're an expert at education because they went to school. But school is very different than it was when all of us were in school. I mean, my children, my oldest and my youngest, the difference in age is 7 years, and there's a difference just between them in the exact same school district, raised by the same parents, same teachers. It has changed quite a bit in the last 10 years, and then since the pandemic, it like sped up even faster with changes. And unless you are really in a public school on a regular basis, you have no idea what it's like. And even for some board members, unless you're very involved, or unless you're also an educator, or your kids are in the school, it's hard to know everything that's going on. But fighting that within the public, their expectations of what they think we should be doing versus what we can and are allowed to do, is always.
And Reno Contipelli, I spent, before I took this job at OSBA, as regional manager, I had spent 20 years on my local board, Cuyahoga Falls, Cuyahoga Heights. You take the river to Cleveland, it's right there. Before you get to all the steel mills, that's us. To me, it was very rewarding. I had a good 20 years on the school board. I had taught there and switched professions, became a firefighter, and then I got on the school board. And one of the things, like Anna said, graduation was just a great day for us. But then every board meeting, you would have kids come to the board meeting and showcase what they're doing in 3rd grade, what they're doing in science club, students of the month. It just gives you a joy because of all the negative things that go on with public education, you get to see the joy of those kids that get to present something for it. It's worth it. And then now that I've been in this position for about 11 years, I'll meet kids that graduate now and say, "Oh, Mr. Contipelli, how you doing? You know, oh, I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer, I'm an engineer, I'm doing this, I'm married, I have kids." So that's how you know that that's the reward right there. And I've got to see it over a 20, 30 year period. What I also will say, on it too, is that what I've seen over the last 30 years, it's 2 things. Eroding tax base, which means it's more stress on you out there as homeowners, and eroding local control. Because local control is what you want to preserve, because you're here in Akron. Those board members in Akron know it's better for you than the people in Columbus and Washington, and that's what we fight every day, public education.
All right, so interesting, and I also want to take this time. I would be remiss because we do have board members from Akron in the audience, I know. Are there other board members? If you're a board member, if you mind just acknowledging, raising your hand or standing up and just quickly give us what district you're from, please.
It's a very full district. Lathardus School District might represent portions of 3 counties. It is Lorraine, Medina.
Oh, really? Pardon me? I know, really, it's the, I've been at the high school for very long.
So we are, those people show.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. Reverend Greg Harrison, member of City School Board.
Thank you.
My name is Jennifer Burke. Appointee to the Cuyahoga Valley Career Center Board by the Revere District.
Okay. Anybody else? All right, thank you. So I just wanted to acknowledge the presence of members, board members are in the room that who may provide some perspective and, or at least as we get to a point where we can open up to kind of a broader discussion where some things are. But one of the things that I'm hearing as this first thing, first question was this idea of student-centered, centering on the student. Well, at least one, I mean, camaraderie of the board, or the ways in which there's a shared vision, a shared sense of purpose. But definitely one of the things dealing with the national, the police, national and state, let's say political whims. But one of the questions that came to mind was, is education still a means of social mobility? Is education, the value of education historically has been one of the means by which we as a society provides opportunities for our citizens to move socially, to actively learn how to be participants in our community, those kinds of things, right? And I'm kind of wondering, does education still play that role, right? And then therefore, how the role of a board member changed in this 30 years, in this since the 2000s? Let's just put it in that context. Of course, there's the whole span of the American experience, right? So, but just how has things changed? And then just briefly, just touch on as they've changed, and what does that mean in terms of the characteristics or the kinds of things that a board member would need to be able to do and be able to do?
So I'll go first on this one. So since 2000, here's how I think things have changed. I went back to the eroding tax base and the fact of eroding local control. So we've had no child left behind. We have federal and state mandates that we don't have a choice. We have to teach. Well, there's only so much time in the day that you have to teach. So you're pulling things away that you want to teach the kids that you can't teach. That's one thing. The other thing too is that they're not giving you money for those. That's why they're called unfunded mandates. So you got to find the money to come up with. I'll give you another example. Public schools, like their 2 districts, they don't have a choice. They have to educate everybody in their district. Sometimes there's not money available. You could have one special education child, one handicapped child that costs you $80,000 to $100,000 that you have to provide transportation or education. So you're pulling that resource away from all the other kids that are in the classroom, And then people are saying, well, you got too much money, why should you be on the ballot? They don't understand that part of what public education has to go through. So that's the biggest change that I've seen over the last 22 years, are the unfunded mandates and the eroding tax base and the eroding local control.
I agree 100% with that. The first thing that came to mind to me was testing and the testing culture that we live in and the way that schools are evaluated on test scores, which in my opinion are not the true vision of a school district. I live in a school district that we get, on that new scale, the state report card is stars. They're not letters anymore. And we get between 3 and 4 stars pretty much on everything consistently out of 5. But to me, we're a 5-star district. My 3 kids went through K-12, graduated, 2 are done with college, they're in the world. My youngest is in college now, and they're all different kids. They all got what they needed, and they are successful. Everybody's path is different, and the public schools will cater to your child and their needs. And that's something that all kids don't get in private schools if they choose, because they don't have to be educated, if they have any kind of disability or anything like that. So definitely, and also the rigor of education today. When I started as a teacher, we did not have very many state tests, and they were maybe one day out of the year, and they were super simple. Now they get tested like in every subject, starting in kindergarten, on computers. Sometimes it's more of a test of how good are you on a computer than the actual content that you're supposed to be tested on. And, the tests take place at a part of the year where it's a year's worth of knowledge, but, in March, they haven't covered a year's worth of material to do that test. So it's very difficult. And also, I think the world has changed in the last 20 to 30 years, and children are not coming to school as prepared as they used to be. They don't have to be reading already when they come to kindergarten, but they have to be able to at least be able to be a good friend and understand, follow rules, things like that. And that has not been the case the last 5 years. And our kids have a lot of social, emotional troubles that have to be dealt with at school before they can learn.
So I agree with everything that you have both said. Public schools educate every child who walks in the door, regardless of what that child needs. And sometimes it's very expensive, sometimes it's very complicated, sometimes it's very frustrating for that child's family because, frankly, we don't always get it right. But we do go in with the right intention of trying to. And that's because that's our job. We are required by law to educate every child who walks in the door. And private schools who are currently taking taxpayer dollars are not. Also, private schools are not required to open their books to you, to the public. My district's books are open to everybody in the community. Our treasurer has been receiving awards for 30 years now for the high quality of our fiscal accountability. I'm very proud of that. Because the buck stops with us on the school board, right? We can't go to the grocery store without hearing from our neighbors about how much the real estate taxes cost. And that's like, I have to remind them that I pay those too. But I want to say one thing that's slightly rosier, which is that in my district, at least, we have been focusing a lot in the past decade or so on ways to provide education that will help our students go to college who wouldn't otherwise be able to. So, AP classes used to be the gold standard for the sign that you're a good student and you are college material. The state's CCP, College Credit Plus program, is in many ways better than AP because you're providing students with dual credits. While in high school, the same class gets you a high school credit and a college credit, which is directly applicable to any public institution in Ohio. Those credits transfer automatically. You don't actually have to go through crazy paperwork. The other thing that we have been focusing on a lot is our career and technical education programs. Similarly, those provide kids with professional level certifications. They can leave high school with a piece of paper in their back pocket that gets them a job right now. Or they can translate those into college credits, but making that work is a little more complicated and requires your average 17-year-old to do more paperwork than normally. And something which we've been doing for a shorter time now in Cleveland Heights, University Heights, which I'm very proud of, is we have a partnership with Tri-C for an associate's degree program while in high school. And we have a third cohort, I believe, of students who sign up in 9th grade. They are taking Tri-C classes in the high school building, starting in 9th grade, and then in 11th and 12th grade, they will take classes on site at Tri-C, so that when they leave us after 4 years, they have an associate's degree in their hot, sweaty. And that's 2 years of college. It's fantastic. And I'm very proud of that. And it's something which did not used to be common. And we are pushing that tremendously because it provides opportunities for students who might not otherwise have the option of going to college.
May I ask, what is the difference between an MOU and a partnership?
A memorandum of understanding,
Versus the
in my world, they tend to be connected to changes to our collective bargaining agreements.
Oh.
I don't know what the legal structure is, which my district has with Tri-C. That would be a question for somebody on salary. Sorry.
Yeah, because I hear a lot of people say partnership, and then some schools say MOU, and then our school district has MOU.
Okay, so we're gonna ask, if you have a question, please put it on the one thing, right? And so I hear, and thank you for explaining, sharing some thoughts about how education has changed. But the other part was, or is, and specifically, what does that mean as a board member, for you as a board member? What does that mean for you in terms of what the role of a board member is, given all these changes, given this environment?
So it just adds to the more things you have to know as a board member. So I give you an example in 2000. Nobody saw No Child Left Behind coming on. So that we had the Ohio School Board Association, I was the board member. We were giving classes and updating superintendents and school board members saying, this is what you have to know, this is what you have to do. So one of the things we do at the Ohio School Board Association, we help board members with that policy and that direction. But it's a huge learning curve to be able to do that. So and that went away. The next thing that comes down is like the state or the federal government. So you have to learn all of that over it, right? And then you take all. We don't know what's going to come out of June 3rd. We have good ideas, but on July 1st, there's going to be a new budget in Ohio. Board members are going to have to learn what's in that 1,200, 1,500 document. What policy? 5,000. What new policy am I going to have to implement in my school district by August or September? And then how am I going to get training so everybody's on the same page with what they want public education to do? And that goes back to that eroding local tax, tax base and local eroding things. So there's more and more pressure on board members. It's not like city council or mayor where it's pretty well defined local government. When you're a board member, you're responsible for the governance of the district, five people. You have to know all that stuff. And you're really, in a sense, responsible for 2 people, superintendent and treasurer. But that's a huge responsibility because they're running the district. They have to do evaluations on them. They have to set the goals of the district. They have to set strategic planning, so there's a lot to do as a board member. So every time something new comes down the road, you have to just sit in a room and revamp all that.
The state of Ohio has a pretty good track record of changing tests on a regular basis. So the complaint is always, oh, you're teaching to the test. It's like, well, you are measuring the test. What gets measured is what people care about. Because that's what makes the front page of the PD every year, right? It's like, where's your ranking compared to everybody else? So we are constantly dealing with whiplash, as you alluded to, because things change constantly and we need to be on top of that. But I think that part of the result of a lot of the things that have happened in Columbus that affect local school boards is that we have become, by force, better advocates. We have to be better representatives of our community because we were elected by our community for our children, right? So there is, I think, a greater focus on advocacy and pushing back against the changes in legislation. Because otherwise we do lose that local control, and school board is the most local thing you can do. You know, your neighbor's money, your neighbor's children. That's it. So yeah, by Ohio revised code, we have 3 jobs to do, right? Hire and fire the superintendent, hire and fire the treasurer, and discuss and pass the budget. Oh, 4 things, and set policy. And that policy piece is also, we're constantly being hampered and redirected by the state because new policy comes out at the state level. It's now in Ohio revised code that we have to do X, Y, Z. So now we have to come up with policy that meets the requirements of Ohio revised code, but still fulfills the needs of our community, right? And my community in particular pushes back quite hard against a lot of the new laws that come out of Columbus because it's not a reflection of the community's values. And they want me to make sure that the district is still following the community's values. And so there's a tussle there. And we still, we swear to to abide by the state and federal constitutions and follow the laws of both. But we also get pushback from our community. So it's an interesting tussle. And I never knew I was going to become a lawyer part-time.
Advocacy is what I was gonna say as well. And in the 12 years that I've served, the last probably 5 or 6 is when I've had to do a lot more homework on not just to attend board meetings, but in between on a regular basis. Because there's so much happening and it's happening very quickly. And somebody might stop you at the grocery store, ask you a question, and you have to know the answer to it. Or not, you might not, but you look stupid, I think, but, and that person might not agree with you. You're telling them what's going on and why you're doing it, and they might not agree with you, and it's a lot different now than it used to be. Also, public participation in school board meetings has changed a lot over the last 5 or 6 years as well. Where you could go a stretch of, months, maybe even a year with nobody ever coming to participate in your meeting by saying anything. And then all of a sudden, you'll have 20 people that want to speak and all about different topics and calling you names and all sorts of things. So I think just the responsibility of being prepared as a board member, as well as what you have to take really from the public, has changed a lot as well. You have to have thick skin.
Just a quick question, because I hear 5,000 pages to learn. Is there a standard, like, day of training? Is there some type of requirement that now this thing is passed, you have to know it, or?
Well, that's what we do at the House School Association, which they're members, Akron, they're all members. So what we'll do is I won't do it, I'm not that smart, but we have smarter people down in Columbus and me. They'll start putting that information out to board members. They'll start having workshops, and they'll start having seminars. And then board members will go to those things, learn, ask questions. And then superintendents have their organization, they'll go through the same process, treasurers have their organization, they'll go through the same process. And hopefully you get it right. Other than that, one thing, we just had executive orders come down from the federal government, which totally changed the last administration. So now you're like, well, wait a second, we gotta do this now? Sometimes it all takes time and questions, and then stuff gets hanging in the courts, but the answer is, that's what we do at the House School Board Association. We provide the information, the training, the questions, answer the questions. And it's a long process, and our people down there will just go over it like for the next 2 months, and they get that information out to members. That helps.
But that is if you're a member.
Yeah, well, everybody's, 99% of the school boards are members of the House School Association.
Okay.
Yeah, and then the ones that aren't member are around the Cincinnati area, and there's probably other organizations that help with that, but that's what we're all public schools.
Okay, okay. So then let's get to then, as a community actor, as a concerned citizen, what are the type of questions that as a citizen I need to be asking school board candidates?
I'll take that.
Yeah.
Why are you running? What do you plan to achieve? You know,
It's not firing the football.
it's not trying to football coach, it's not.
Changing the color of the
Yeah,
uniforms, you know.
yeah, it's bigger than that. You know, can you work in a team atmosphere? This is not city council or mayors where, you know, you see all that stuff on TV. 5 board members really have to get along and become a team. And not everybody's gonna get what they want. You gotta come to a consensus because you're doing the best for kids. And you really don't micromanage a school. You hire people to run the school. You got step back. Run the school. You just give them the goals and the guidance to do that. So that's the first question I'd ask. Why are you running? You know, what do you plan to achieve? You know, where do you see the school in 1, 3, 5 years to get on the board? You know, how much do they know about the state and federal issues to make good decisions? And are they willing to work to learn those issues? Because you can't know everything. When I got elected, I was so weak on finances. I didn't know what FICA, I didn't know. So I had to learn that part of the school board. If I knew curriculum, I didn't know the finance part. So that'd be a question I would ask.
Okay, I thought it was more, okay.
Can I answer your question?
I think that's
Yeah,
really.
that's-
I think, why are you doing this?
One. Right.
People who are coming in because they have a personal beef or they have a single agenda item that they care about are not the right people to have on school.
Okay, well, then ask that question, then, because in this time, there are people who are running to get on to school board to have an agenda. And well, truth be told, in a lot of cases, let's say, that agenda is a part of a national playbook. That they're often submitting or doing policies that they have not even fully read or written themselves, but it's come from, you know, that kind of thing. So dealing with that kind of rancor, dealing with you may have 4 or 5, or, you know, you may have a group of folks that are committed, believe in education, believe in public education, and you have someone that's 1 or 2 that's on the board that are clearly there for that personal agenda. How do you deal with that?
Well, I think the public needs to do a little bit of homework themselves, about candidates and about what school boards can and cannot do. Because, for example, it is a common thing where somebody wants to get on the board to have someone fired. And it doesn't work that way. The board doesn't choose who gets fired or who gets hired, other than the treasurer and the superintendent. That's it. Everything else, you know, has its own process. These are all people who are unionized. There's due process and everything that has to be followed. You can't just get on the board and say, I want this person fired. So if someone is telling you that's why they're running, they have no idea what their role is. If they don't know anything about education, I mean, most board members are not teachers, but if they have no idea whatsoever, that the state decides what the curriculum is, not the local school district and things like that, a lot of things are out of board members' control. So I think it's important to find out before you consider voting for someone, what school members do, and then listen to their responses when there's candidate nights and things like that. And the Ohio School Board Association website can give you all that information.
Okay. And a little bit pushback in that, because you said, here's what, as a community member.
Yeah.
But being on the board, what do you do?
Well, now it's not big. Well, once they're on the board, are they in the majority or are they in the minority? Okay, we've seen slates run like that, okay? And what ends up happening is that eventually the community will figure it out. I'm trying to be nice about this. Because when you're a board member, I use this as a family, you're married to the superintendent treasurer. That's it. If your superintendent treasurer can't get along with your board, they're gone. They're gone, or you're getting rid of them. So you're going to lose good quality people out of your district. They'll just go somewhere else. And eventually the community gets it right. And either they see through that or they accept that. So once they're elected, there's not much you can do. The only thing I would suggest is that you just try to lock yourselves in a room, do some strategic planning, do some goals. What helped my board out when we went through that is that we locked ourselves in a room and we came up with 7 or 8 goals that we all agreed on, and our strategic plan came from that. So if someone had an agenda, we would call them out and say, well, how does that pertain to these goals? You got a personal agenda. So you got to have other board members willing to do that, but it's not a perfect world. If the 5 people on the board or 7 people on the board all have to agree on the goals and the strategic plan, and then you let your administrators go out and administrate at that. And that's what I've seen is the more of the micromanaging part of board members who they want to run stuff. Well, you're not qualified to run stuff. Your goal just is to tell the superintendent, here's what I think, let him go out and do that. So that's how you deal with it. But in the perfect world, it may not work out.
I think as a board member, once you're elected, the first thing you do that first year is read everything. I mean, there's a fire hose of information pouring out into your mouth because you have to learn all your collective bargaining agreements, however many unions your district has, right? So at least you've got teachers, you've got certificated and classified at minimum, that's 2 contracts. Policy, you need to have a handle on your basic current policy, because how can you decide what needs to be changed or improved if you don't know what you've got, right? What are we operating under? You need to have an understanding of other things like the student code of conduct, the employee code of conduct, because when there is an issue involving an employee, for example, the superintendent will make a recommendation to the board for termination or for whatever the punishment should be for some egregious behavior, whatever, let's say drinking on the job when you're a bus driver, really bad. So as a board member, you can't walk into that meeting without having any idea of what the normal operating procedures are for your district. You said something about curriculum that gave me pause. The state sets the standards, but the district and the board votes on which curriculum to adopt, which in theory will meet those standards, right? So there is actually some local control around curriculum. Because we have a 6-year rolling process for looking at our curricula for each of the 4 courses, so that we can update things, make them more relevant to our student body, stuff like that. But yeah, what do you do on board? You read, you learn, you sit there and listen and take lots and lots of notes until you finally are less scared and are able to stick your hand up next.
So looking at a lot of things here, and I'm trying to also incorporate some of the things we've been talking about. If you had to boil it down to, let's say, a set of 3 skills that are absolute in terms of being on the board, ideally. 3 skills, absolute. of course, everybody brings a number of other things, but if you're saying absolutely, three skills, both there.
I would say, one, come prepared. Malia hit that. A lot of reading, a lot of, ask questions. I would say build relationships with your administrators, your teachers, your staff, your community. That's huge. That's really your job as a board member. You are the eyes and ears of the district to tell the superintendent this is going on. And I'd say the third one, which I just forgot, I'm getting old. I had to thought my head went away. Yeah, I think.
No company.
Communication, be a good communicator, but also be a good listener. And, not everybody can do both or do them well. It's just important that you're able to share your concerns and also you're able to listen to other people when their point of view is different from yours.
I think not reacting quickly is important because parents will come to you as a board member because there's a crisis. And that means that they're at a heightened level, emotional level, right? And as a board member, it's important not to overreact or not to react quickly. And I serve as a go-between. I don't know the answer, but I can put you in touch with the person who can help you, right? And as a board member, it's inappropriate for me to talk to a teacher about somebody's child. But I can remind the parent that if you haven't talked to the teacher first, coming straight to the board president is really the wrong approach. Gentle, very gentle. So redirecting people who are usually very upset about something, whatever it is. And the same is true with teachers. Teachers will sometimes come to a board member because they know me or they live in the community or whatever about something and think, well, you got to talk to your building administrator first, see what's going on. Communicating, being a go-between, and making sure that you are able to work with everybody. Because it's important not to burn any bridges ever.
All right, so I was there's a bit surprised that none of y'all mentioned finance, even though
That's part of the first thing I said. Coming prepared,
Berea.
doing your homework.
Okay.
That's policy, finding
Okay.
everything going down to state. I mean, you really, because you get an agenda and you should know what's on the agenda every month, but that's part of that. It's
Okay.
not
And there's
part of
five, I mean, the board is 5 people. We don't each have any individual power. So finance is also not my forte, but it is on one of my other school board members. And, and I'm stronger with the curriculum education techniques. So everybody brings different strengths and you work on it together. But I mean, we're not physically creating the budget. The budget is created by the treasurer and the administrative team.
but you gotta be able to read it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And that's why- yeah.
Right. And I know it's unfair because I said three
Yeah,
most important, and
Yeah.
so it's a little bit unfair, but, so where would, if I'm interested in becoming a school board member, are there resources that would help me learn some of the things that you're talking about?
yeah, that's what we do at the House School Board Association. Actually, we'll have a workshop where people wanted to run over the summer. People will go to it, we'll explain to them what you get yourself into. How to run a campaign finance law, so you don't get in trouble. And then they'll answer questions on what we're doing tonight, what is your role? And that's what we do at the House School Board Association. Okay.
And the other place to go for that sort of information also is your county board of elections. They are incredibly helpful. They will hold workshops on campaign finance law, which has nothing to do with being a school board member, right? Being an effective campaigner there's no overlap between that and being an effective school board member, except for the communication. So, there are people who are happy to help you get started on a campaign. And then talking to the current members of the school board, meeting with the superintendent, meeting with the treasurer, learning a little bit about what the main priorities of your district are, to see if it's something that you can align with, because not every school district is different, right? There's 611 of us in Ohio. And your district is incredibly different than my district, is incredibly different from Akron's district and Berea. Because we are local, right? And our responsibility is to our local community. And there's just infinite variety.
All right, so. Kind of, good?
I just forgot what I was gonna say.
Okay. Well, let me scoot down for you. Take it. Let's say so, because I hear, and we'll come maybe circle back around to some of it. There are these state, federal mandates or policies or political winds that blow, right? One of which is, there's a provision in the current budget that starts to require, school board candidates to declare a park.
Yes.
Boo, are we booing?
Yes.
So, that's what y'all doing? We're booing. But in so many ways, you kind of know where people are anyway, because some of the stuff that's agenda is coming through.
But it shouldn't be.
It should.
But
Okay.
education should not be.
Education
political.
is nonpartisan. I mean, everybody's children need to be educated.
If you're running for a public school board, you should support public education. You should not be supporting public school vouchers that are taking money away from your kids. I mean, that's not political. Why don't you want to be on the board to be part of the problem, which I guess some people roll that way, but I want to be a part of something that I can help and support. It should not be that way, because there will be people that will just, check who they want because of their party. And that might not necessarily be the best person for the job.
Okay.
And in fact, in Texas, it has backfired. Yes,
Okay.
I mean, if I'm not mistaken, we don't require.
the people that they want elected have gotten elected.
But sometimes you see,
Primaries, but not,
the judges don't even
I'm trying to.
do that until recently, or maybe recently they are.
They're saying, is there one talk?
Are they, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But now, school board members, I just think for that, kids walk in the door. No one knows who it is. You're partisan. You're doing what's best for the child, not the party,
Okay, now, y'all can give me in trouble. All right, so,
Yeah.
I've been good up until now. And I see the look on my face, like, what's about to happen? So, because we often talk about education, we say, we're all here for the best interest of the child. We're in education, we often say, every teacher is here to do, doing the greatest thing ever. I can speak from my own experience and have a deep commitment to education, public education. My mother, my grandfather, my father. There are communities and there are folks from time to time, and some people fairly consistently through history, in which the best doesn't show up for them. Right? And I think sometimes when we have these discussions about what it means in education, what it means to be a person committed to overseeing or writing policy, picking the right type of people to engage a community and engage the children with your taxes, with using your taxes and your children. We have to have some of those hard conversations about, hey, this is where accountability tells us we need to do better. Okay? So as a school board member, as a person interested, some of these folks out here, I'm assuming, getting onto the school, how do you address, how do you deal with some of those issues that are the reality of our history in this society, are the reality of how certain students, populations have been underserved, overlooked, or otherwise not always given the best.
Well, that's a very good question, and it's very difficult right now because of a lot of the restrictions that our state legislature is trying to put on what can and cannot be done. And can and cannot be said. You might be able to talk about this more because of what you guys did a few months ago.
Troublemakers that we are?
Yes.
Yes, sure. So Cleveland Heights University Heights was the first school district in Northeast Ohio to pass an equity policy in 2016, before I was on the board, actually very shortly before I was on the board. And we have taken that very seriously and look at all of our major decisions through an equity lens. And as we say from the beginning, equity and equality are two different words with two different meanings, right? A child who comes to kindergarten for the first time, having been taken to the children's museum and the zoo and the park and spending summers playing with their friends and all of those sorts of things, has a leg up on a child who hasn't had those experiences by the age of 5, right? So the child who didn't have those experiences needs extra help in order to be able to progress through the education system. Those inequities are things that we address head on and we talk about, and we make no bones about where we fall short, right? I mean, historically, African-American children have been deprived education of the same caliber as white children. Historically, and still to this day, children with special needs have been deprived the caliber of education that typically developing children get. Historically, in this country, rural children are deprived the quality of education that children in a big city get. Again, access to resources, experiences outside the classroom, et cetera, et cetera. And poverty is the biggest driver of inequity. So we have to look at that head on and name it and figure out ways to address it and try to improve. I mean, the goal is always to improve outcomes. Now, outcomes are defined for us by the state as test scores, right? I define outcomes in a variety of different ways. Test scores are nice, but let's talk about graduation rates. Let's talk about the amount of money that our seniors are offered in college scholarships, right? That's a number that we track in CHUH that we've been tracking for about 10 years now. And the kids who just walked across the stage at the end of May earned $24 million in scholarship offers. I mean, that's huge for 370 kids, right? It's amazing. And when we first started tracking it, we were in the 11 or $12 million range. So what matters gets measured. What's measured matters, right? So be very careful what you're actually measuring, because that's a reflection of your community's values. And we've decided that that's really important to us, because again, many of our students wouldn't have the opportunity to go to college without those scholarship offers or without the ability to get a number of college credits done for free. That's, we were talking earlier about public education as a stepping stone for upward mobility, right? That's what we do. That's what we work on. And it's, you know, the children of upper middle class kids will do fine regardless, because their families have the resources and the wherewithal. And if your parents went to college, even if it was a million years ago, they at least have some understanding of the system and what you need to do to be prepared for college. But if your parents didn't go to college, you have no idea what the expectations are, right? And that's terrifying. And the potential for failure is much higher. and it can be much more devastating. So that's why we focus so much on trying to provide access to higher education for those of our kids who want it and who have the ability. And, you know, a kid who gets an associate's degree at the age of 17, like, that's on. That's
But the
amazing.
government is trying to tie our hands on creating programs that can help with the internet.
So is there, go back to the association, places that provide training, or are there networks in which, whereas a board or a district that's doing this type of work, that other districts can learn what's going on and begin to replicate or connect?
Yeah, so when you ask that question, what are three things you gotta do? Like I said, build relationships. These two have built relationships, board members out there build relationships, because your school districts, school board members a lot of credit, because they've been dealt a bad hand for decades. And your triage, here's the most critical thing in my district I have to do. What am I gonna give up to solve this problem? But one of the things that good board members do through networking is they find best practices in other districts. So I don't have to reinvent the wheel. Oh, they did this over here at the Cuyahoga Valley Career Center. Okay, we could steal that idea, borrow that idea, tweak it, use it over here, and it works. And one of the things that we do as a House School Board Association, through our training and capital conference and whatever we do, is board members get a chance and they get to talk to one another. Oh my God, I got this problem over here in Black River. Well, they've had over there in Wayne County. You guys should get together and share that idea. Saves a lot of money. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. But I give board members credit for doing that, because the financial part of it, you know, you just dealt a bad hand. And I'll go back to your question on the poverty and all that stuff. You know, they're making tough decisions because you have this core curriculum you have to teach that costs money, but then the special education cost to it. So now what gets cut out of this? Busing, co-curricular activities, the fun things you want to do with kids, you can't afford it anymore. And that's where the state is failing to fund schools, because every budget that comes out, it's less and less money for the schools. So the schools either have to go to the residents to pass the tax levies, or if those don't pass, you're taking programs away from kids. And that's where you start to get this domino effect, going back to your question on why aren't kids achieving and why kids learn, because the resources aren't there.
I'm a little bit pushback in this because even there are times when the resources are there and choices are being made about not that type of topic, right? So there is that. So it's not just an issue of if I had resources, they would get it too, right? So, but I understand the spirit of what you're saying and understand it is, and there's no clear, easy answer. For sure.
A lot of that though is out of the board member realm.
Mhm.
You know, we know what's going on to a certain extent with what we're told. And if we don't know that kind of thing is happening, then we can't act on it. You know what I'm saying?
I hear you.
And because we're not in the classroom every day, we don't know every single child and every child's needs. So I think boards want to do something, but they might not know that there's a need aside from the money issue.
I hear you. Okay. I'm not quite sure where we are on time in terms of this is supposed to be an hour or 90 minutes or kind of where we.
We planned for 90 minutes, but you know, we could end when we're ready.
Okay, I just need to know, do I?
A lot, we got those questions.
Yes, I've been trying to incorporate, yeah, but we got some more. That's fine. So. Okay, so let's talk about, because since COVID, right, we it's fair enough, can we have a general understanding that education has been changing for quite some time. But COVID is a particular event that has kind of, accelerated or brought to light some of the challenges and or failings, of education, right? And again, there's a reason why they asked me. I'm hoping it's all the same. Because John Dewey, right, 1938, experience and education, if I'm that's his thing. In 1938, he described traditional education, the idea of a student sitting in a classroom, four walls, as antiquated in 1938, right? And 90 years now, we're often trying to understand education in a way that was described as old 90 years ago. Right? And COVID particularly brought that out, the idea that education exists within four walls, within this particular time period. And we had to become more agile. We had to find what Karen Mapp would describe as understanding parents as primary educational resources. So building those relationships, building those kinds of things. So not as teachers, but again, as board members, how do you help move, shape, how do you communicate with the community what education needs to look like? Even though sometimes you're spending so much time trying to triage, but you're trying to fix something that more than one scholar described as being old 90 years ago.
Yeah, I'll take it. Let me go back on COVID.
Mm-hmm.
No one saw COVID coming. Nobody, even out there, even me where I was. So boards had to adapt.
Mm-hmm.
Their budgets had to adapt. Their policy had to adapt. Everything had to adapt. Your 5-year forecast had to adapt to them. Okay. So the good news out of that is that, hey, we adapted and we educated kids. May not be great education, it was on Zoom. but we adapted to it. I think personally, because I teach at a community college, after I try to see, is that kids are coming in and you almost need like an individual academic plan. The problem is you don't got the money or the resources, so you all get lumped in a class, and it's the old bell-shaped curve. And I was a teacher back in the 80s. You teach, and I don't want to say it's in the middle, but yeah, I don't know if that's changed. My daughter had an IEP. It was nice for her, but she had an individual education plan. It was nice. She had accommodations. And I think what's going to happen is that more and more kids are going to come to school needing accommodations. So that means you're going to need money and you're going to need resources and more staff. And it's just the structure is not there from the state and federal level.
Kids are coming to school today to be entertained. They're not coming to school to learn. Because they spend so much time, elementary kids especially, at home on their devices and stuff. And they used to instant gratification on their devices, and that's not how school works. And it's difficult. It's difficult as educators. As board members, we can't tell teachers how to teach. I mean, that's not our role. We have to trust that the superintendent is doing their job in managing their staff and what, is being taught. But still, I mean, it's up to every individual teacher how they're going to be delivering their instruction based on who the kids in their class are. So let's say you're a high school teacher and you teach the same subject for 5 different periods a day. The way you teach it to one class may be different than the way you teach it to another class because of the makeup of that class, and a good teacher adapts to that.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, as a board member, it's important for us to encourage that kind of practice, but we can't enforce it. Does that make sense?
I got.
It's not.
I hear.
I think there is an inherent disconnect between the methodology of teaching
Mhm.
and the fact that every kid already has a phone in their pocket.
Mhm.
And they have access to the answer to every question.
Mhm.
But how we teach and why we teach the way we do are connected to a very old system, right? They're going to be tested on, do you remember the Pythagorean theorem? And can you implement it?
Mhm.
The reality is, if I have forgotten the Pythagorean theorem, I could just ask Google
Mhm.
and it would do it for me.
Right.
Right? So what is it? What is our purpose? Right? Our purpose used to be to teach kids things that they needed to know in order to be successful. But, and those things were defined basically as like, you have to memorize this crap.
Mhm.
Okay. But again, as school board members, we only have so much latitude.
Mhm.
In my district, we just approved a new curriculum for preschool. Did you know that preschool has a curriculum? Okay, sorry. I mean, I knew that too because my kids went to preschool, but it's just like, so one of the things that mattered the most to us, besides the fact that it had to hit the standards required by the state of Ohio, because everything has to, so it hits the standards. But that this particular curriculum is play-based, it's hands-on, it's all about the kids running around and playing with stuff. And, you know, if this week's theme is balls, then they spend the whole week working on balls and they learn things about balls that will eventually work their way up to physics, right? Because the principles behind playing with a ball are no different than
Yeah.
Newton, right? It's just that you don't call it Newton until you're in high school. So we can do that, right? We can make sure that the curriculum is less stultifying
Mhm.
than what used to be the curriculum, right? And we do. We tried really hard. We can encourage in the budgeting process a greater emphasis on hands-on learning, working in teams. What do employers want? They want people who are comfortable dealing with new situations, comfortable working with other people, and can get stuff done on deadline, whatever the stuff is that you're doing for work, right? And if you listen to the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce, or Jerry Serino, our only job is to create effective workers who will provide a profit for their employers. Okay, so if I use that framework, then let's make sure that our kids graduate able to work together with people who are different from themselves, who have different backgrounds and different life experiences, find common ground, figure out how to solve the problem, pull out their phones and use Google when appropriate, and then implement it, right? Because Google will give you the formula. Google may not tell you how to use it.
Doesn't tell you how to use it, and it doesn't tell you about the, well, that's all.
Right, so you have to be able to do the reasoning, the critical thinking,
That part.
and the working with other human beings, because we are at heart human beings. We need to work with each other. You can't just go off by yourself and be a successful human being,
Yes.
despite what some people think.
Yes. And so, I probably did my quick soapbox, because going back to John Dewey again, during that time period, human information, right? So even the concept of education, human information was doubling about once every 100 years at that point, in the early 1900s.
Now it's 18 months, right?
Something like that, right? So quite literally, a person with a doctorate could literally know everything that there was to know about a
In their
particular,
field. Yeah.
in their field, because I had 100 years to study. And education was built around the idea that you can actually remember stuff. And 18 years from now, that stuff that you remember actually was still relevant, right? But in a time in which the sum total of everything that humans know is doubling once every 2 years or so, by the time I remembered something, it's probably already obsolete.
Mhm.
But if you're teaching as if that information that you're teaching is gonna last for 100 years. That's the thing. That is a policy practice. Kind of sort of, and I know, I'm thinking of, but then as a board member, I think he's getting into some of this. How can, as board members or those interested in joining the board, advocate or provide opportunities for policy that one helps the community to understand what education is now, what its value is now, that can help a potential teacher or those coming on board know, here's what's necessary now.
Yeah, let me add something. You know, we talked about budget, I'm not gonna go in that direction, but every profession has professional development. Okay. You want your doctor to have professional development, you want that 20, 30-year-old doctor to have the latest technology and the latest information. School boards want the same thing for their staff. They want teachers, they want the administrators, they want for the school board. When you go back to the budget, go back to what I said about triage, yeah, guess what ends up getting, well, you can't afford it anymore. So now you're not getting that information, or you're not going to those seminars, you're not networking with these people on a state or national level. And I think that's what you're going to end up seeing. Because like you said, it's going fast. AI is going fast. AI, all this stuff's going fast. We're not, I don't think, my opinion, we're going to be able to keep up with that because we don't have the resources to keep up with it or the money to keep up with it. So.
Yes. I'm kind of couple of things because I'm not gonna call out anybody or no district particular. But one of the things that you said, particularly as board members, that relationship between the board, the superintendent, the board, and the treasurer are the absolutes in terms of state minimum status. Are there, or in what ways in which I know way back when there was, deliberative dialogue, discussions, or there was this movement and community, have these community discussions and those kind of things. Are there or should there be, to what extent is it, let me ask this, let me just pop in. Is there a professional standard for a school board member? Is that a thing? Is that a thing? And as a part of that, would that be about how do you engage in a deliberative or what kind of ways do you engage in meaningful discussions with groups of people who come from that common ground?
The answer is there is a professional standard for it. Okay. You have two up there right now. There's some in the audience. When they go out and speak, they're speaking for themselves. They don't speak for the whole board. Right? The board has a spokesperson. It's usually the board president or the superintendent. So that's one thing board members have to be careful. I'm an elected official. Here's my opinion. Here's what I think. It doesn't mean the board staff. Right. So you're not really speaking for the board. So I think that's part of this professional staff. And the other thing is that you got to watch the social media stuff, because when you're posting something maybe as a mother or father, you're not posting something as the board, the president, or the board.
What I'm hearing is more of a code of ethics.
Yes.
Versus
yes. And
the idea of
yes.
a professional standard. And which I know there's a slight difference, but there is a difference. Do your association, or is there another social firm?
We do help with that. We do help with that.
We help with it, but do you certify, or do you kind of give a stamp of approval?
We don't certify. We just give guidance and here's what you should do. These are the things that make you a good board member. If you have a question, we try to coach them through good practices.
So as a candidate or someone interested in, should I come to one of your?
Yes, we would help them. We would answer the questions, and they're neutral people.
Would it be unethical? Would it be unethical if I then said, as a candidate, I have been through such and such training?
No,
Or
I
I've been,
think I think that's good for the community to know that means you're taking it serious.
Yeah, I mean, we have, our district pays for new school board members to attend seminars held by the Ohio School Boards Association, because, you know, there's, I can't remember what it's called, but there's School Board 101, there's
Yeah.
Finance 101,
Mhm.
there's some introductory, you know,
It's a track that we.
half-day events that are super useful as a new board member. If you were a candidate who wanted to, you know, be extra prepared and you went and attended a couple of those things, it would put you in a very good position to hit the ground running if you were elected.
And even as experienced board members, it's important to always be attending training because you're always learning something new. And if someone is not open to doing training, I think that will cause a strain amongst the board.
could you chip?
Yeah, exactly.
And we have two now national associations for school board members.
Mhm.
And that's a long, ugly political story, but, it's everything. But that is another way, you know, I attend specific conferences regularly because that's how I know I'm going to go knock heads with people whose districts are similar to mine, but may not be in Ohio. And it's incredibly helpful to talk to people over coffee or whatever about how we address certain issues because we have commonality.
And the JBSs have their own network, right? We have
Mhm.
ESCs, and so within the state, there's, you know, other counties get together.
Mhm.
So there is opportunity to learn and grow in professional development if you take advantage of that.
And we have a Northeast Ohio School Board members signal chat.
Yeah.
Of people who are like, can't believe what's happening at the State House, right? But then, we share things like sample language for resolutions, or how did you tweak your policy to handle this thing? And we help each other because it's ridiculous to try to reinvent the wheel. Nobody has the time or the bandwidth, and we're not getting paid enough to write all of this legal language from scratch. Right, we have day jobs and we're not all trained lawyers, so, getting advice and sample language from each other or from the lawyers at OSBA who are fantastic about providing us with sample language that we can then tweak. And again, right, we're always dealing with what's right for our local community. You can't just boilerplate your way through school.
All right, so we're gonna start bringing this thing home if best we can. Couple of questions that stand out that you mentioned, you know, I think you put it, things that get measured, get done, matter,
Matters get mentioned.
and what matters get measured, right? So, but you also talked about the idea that at the local level, that the values of the community should, or if I'm saying this right, should be expressed or be played out in terms of what the quality of the education you're providing. So,
Yeah. Well, the community's values need to be reflected in the education we're providing the community's children, right? I mean, that's the
so
point.
then what are some other measures that matter? What beyond just the standardized test, beyond the state report card? What are some ways in which a board members, a district can measure? I think you talked about some of them in terms of graduation rates, scholarships, those kinds of things. But what are some other things that can be done to show the value of the education beyond just the test scores?
Participation rates. How many kids are involved in sports? How many kids are involved in arts programs? How many kids are involved in extracurricular clubs? Whatever it is, because getting a 16-year-old out of bed is the most difficult thing a parent ever has to do, right? So figure out what the hook is for that kid. Every kid's something different, right? So my son, what got him out of bed was knowing that if he was late for his first period criminal justice class, he was going to have to do 50 push-ups for his teacher. He was only late once. So, okay, that's one particular teacher's method, right? And it was relevant to the curriculum he was teaching, so fine. But for another kid, it may be robotics class at 3:30, right? The club or whatever. And so if the more participation you have, the larger percentage of your students are involved in something outside of the classroom, the more engaged they are in everything else. And if you can get them in the building, they'll learn Pythagoras by accident, right? That's kind of how, hoping that they're going to pick up enough algebra to get through their lives.
So as board members, we have to provide the resources to have these extra activities that
Right.
might not be part of the classroom. We have to make sure that there's many different activities available.
And not, it's hard, again, because everything comes down to money. Our fight is always around not excluding kids by accident. So if you have to pay $50 for your uniform, who's not going to come and play? Right?
Yeah.
Participation fees are important if you don't have the money to pay for whatever the thing is. But participation fees are a barrier, and that you have to be very upfront about that. So that's where PTAs and booster clubs and all these things become incredibly important. And that you have to know your community, right? If your community says it's really important for us that all of our children are exposed to music in one form or another, instrumental, vocal, then you have to pay attention to that, right? Because they're telling you this matters to us. On the other hand, you also can come back to them and say, we can't afford to send the middle schoolers to, you know, the Ohio Music Educators Association contest, music in the parks, where they go to Sandusky and compete. And that's like high level music for a bunch of 13-year-olds. Pretty cool. And there's an amusement park attached to it by accident, right? Again, it's like, but what they're doing musically is very high caliber, but it costs. So then we do the fundraising and the PTAs get involved and, you know, all that stuff. So it is a constant dialogue between the school board and the community about what do we care about? What are we willing to put money behind? Is it more important that we pay for X or Y? And if we can't afford to do both, then how are we gonna, you know, bridge the gap somehow?
Okay, what I do hear is going back to kind of do the full circle. Communication, relationships, know your stuff so that when you have this connection, you're communicating something that matters. Right? What I also hear is, as a set of policy, as a part of, as I think you mentioned, you mentioned the idea that fundamentally as a board member, your job is to be in the community, sharing information. Then having that information to be shared, right? You know, yes, here's the task force, here's the state policy, but here's our participation rate. Here's, I know this matters to you, and here's how it's reflected in our district in the way that we do things. So that there is this communication going back and forth. And so there's that, right? So bring this thing home. So first, let me say thank you for the time that you shared and the information that you shared with me. I'm going to ask you to just provide a couple of things. One, what would be the most important thing the community should know about what school boards do, and then who judging who should be on that school board? And what is your hope? What do you see as a solution, or what do you see as, you know, all the stuff that's going on, all the challenges? But what is your hope? What is it that says, hey, I'm still in it?
Say, if your heart's in the right place, run. We'll provide you the training and the guidance that you need on that. I'd also say that what I hope is that we only kind of always hear the negative things about schools. We never hear the good things about schools. I had a banquet. Oh my God, what a facility. How many people even know what they do? I had something at the Contipelli Career Center. Oh my God, what they do for kids. But it's always the negative stuff that gets in the press or in the paper or whatever. We don't tell, well, we tell our story, but sometimes it doesn't get out there that all the good things, you got some outstanding public schools. Just in, you know, you can take an hour drive that we would be proud to be a member of. They're almost like private schools, literally what you're offering kids. And we don't get that message out there. And I think because of that, it's not our fault, but we tried. People don't know that because most people don't have kids in school. And they just think, oh, there's another tax increase. Oh, I got to support this. And sometimes it's just, you know, go look at your local school and good things they're doing. That's what I would hope, that people would take appreciation of all the good schools that are out there.
I would say if you're thinking about it, then you should definitely do it. It's a great experience. You learn a lot about yourself. You also have to be open to learning, to listening, being okay with being wrong or being the minority in a group. But you have to stand with your principles and speak up for what you feel is right. When you're looking at other candidates to vote for, if someone comes off as they know everything, I wouldn't vote for that person because no one knows everything. No one is an expert at everything. If you hear someone talking about something very specific that they want to do once they get on the board, I would question that because they probably can't do that. And they would need the support of at least 2 other people to be able to do something. Also, as a board member, once you get elected, it's very important to be open to the community and making yourself available to them. Whenever you get an email, make sure that you are responding, even if you can't help them, just thank you for letting me know, I'm gonna pass this on to so-and-so, so they feel appreciated, they feel heard. Take time to set up times at the local library or something where, like office hours, where people can just come and talk to you. Chances are people won't, but if you're at least opening it up and making yourself available, you're showing that you're willing to listen. And sometimes you always have to remember that people, if they know who you are, how you behave in public is important, even if you're not there as a board member. So if I'm just at my son's football game, you know, that's a reflection. And it's not necessarily fair, but it's the way it is. It's a whole, you know, persona. I mean, one time I made the mistake of going to CVS about 9 o'clock at night after I had showered and just wearing, you know, basically what we're going to become pajamas, but it was just a, you know, sweatshirt and flip flops, and I ran into one of my son's teachers, and you know, whatever. But that's a funny example. But you know, you always have to be aware of who you are and where you are, and just always try to represent yourself and your district well.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. I mean, the most important thing we do on the school board is set policy. And that's connected to hiring the right treasurer, hiring the right superintendent. And you're looking for people who are the right fit for your community, for your students. And sometimes you may not get it right. There is a dearth of treasurers in Ohio. We were very fortunate that we had the same treasurer for 30 years, and we just hired a new treasurer who starts next week. So we'll see how that goes. I'm very excited. She's going to be fantastic. But governance, right, is about keeping the big picture in mind and not getting sucked into details. Everybody wants to talk to you about whatever their detail is, and so you've got to make sure that you redirect them to the right people for that. What gives me hope was the 4 ninth graders who I took to the State House to testify recently. They were amazing. 4 kids, each one, you know, completely different, and they each had different things to say in their testimony, and they're editing each other's testimony in the car while I'm driving, you know. And they were fantastic. It's like, oh, I remember why I do this. So that they can show their participation in democracy, that they're paying attention, they care about the issues which affect not only them, but all the younger children coming up behind them, right? And that was, it just warmed my heart. It's fantastic. And these 9th graders, I realized, didn't know what the basement of the State House looked like. They hadn't, I said, well, we have to go take a look at the map. And they said, what do you mean the map? I said, before, right? I said, what do you mean? You haven't been here? You didn't go on your 5th grade field trip to the State House? And they said, COVID. And I looked at them and said, oh God, I'm so stupid. So we went downstairs and we had to kind of muscle our way through a bunch of field trips of like little kids, 4th graders and 5th graders, so that I could take these high schoolers to go and look at the basement of the State House and see how the Senate connects to the House of Reps, all this stuff. And it's like, oh, right. So, and I'm not a teacher. I don't know what the curriculum is supposed to say about that field trip, but it's like, okay, come, you've participated in democracy. You are now officially US citizens, you know, like you've done it. And those kids, every time I do this, it's wonderful. And that's part of, you know, what my community expects, that we send our kids down, that we teach them the process, that they become engaged citizens.
Well, again, I'm in on that and thank you. If someone from Andrew will come up, I'll say, for my part, I thank you. This has been very interesting and engaging and enlightening. And so thank you. And on behalf of I represent also the NAACP Akron, and we too partnered with all of the different organizations that are concerned about what education is and making sure that quality people and concerned folks are there to help move us into the 21st century.
We're in the 21st century.
Yeah, well,
And for coming, everyone, and a special thanks to everyone on the panel and Dr. Bob for moderating.